The twin suns of the Alaran homeworld shone over a planet that once looked like a dream. Blue rivers cut across endless fields of silver grass, and tall crystal towers reached for the sky. The Alaran were peaceful beings, tall, graceful, and kind-hearted. They loved knowledge, art, and music. War was something they had only read about in their ancient records, a thing of the past, something too cruel for their gentle nature. For generations they had lived in harmony, creating a world filled with beauty, invention, and laughter. But everything changed when the Dravak horde came. The invasion began on a quiet morning, when most of the cities were still asleep. From the sky, massive dark ships appeared like shadows swallowing the sun. The Alaran had never seen anything like them, metal monsters floating silently before releasing a storm of fire. The peaceful world turned into chaos within minutes. Buildings crumbled, forests burned, and the air filled with the cries of the terrified. The Dravak horde was not a race that came to negotiate. They came to conquer, to enslave, and to destroy. They were known across the galaxy for their cruelty. They took what they wanted, leaving behind ruins and ash. When their leader, Warlord Kral, looked upon the Alaran world, he saw not people but resources, slaves, and land to claim. His fleet descended with no mercy. The Alaran were not ready. They had no real weapons, only basic defense drones meant for meteor protection. They tried to reason with the invaders. They sent peaceful messages begging them to stop, to talk, to show compassion, but the Dravak only laughed. Mercy is weakness, they said, and their ships continued to burn the skies. In the great capital city of Lithara, panic spread like wildfire. The Council of Elders gathered in their shining hall, their faces pale and voices trembling. The eldest among them, Elder Vaniel, stood up and spoke, his voice heavy with sorrow. "We cannot fight them," he said. "But we cannot just wait to die either." One of the younger council members, Lyra, stepped forward. "There is one thing we can do," she said. "We can send a call for help. There are others out there in the stars. Maybe someone will listen." Some elders hesitated. "No one will come," one said quietly. "No one risks war for strangers," but Lyra refused to give up. "Even if there is a small chance, we must try. Hope is all we have left." So they sent their message. Using their last functioning communication satellites, they broadcasted a signal far into the dark reaches of the galaxy. It was a short message, only a few words, but filled with desperation and pain. To whoever hears this, it said, "We are the Alaran. Our world is dying. Please help us." The signal spread like a whisper into the infinite void. It passed through star systems, through debris fields, through forgotten regions of space. For days the Alaran waited, listening, hoping for a reply. None came. Outside, the world burned. The Dravak ground troops landed next. They moved like beasts, armored and cruel. They tore through the cities, capturing whoever survived. The Alaran hid in underground tunnels, their once bright eyes filled with fear. In one shelter, a young Alaran boy named Tien clutched his mother's hand, asking in a trembling voice, "Will someone come for us?" His mother smiled weakly through tears. "Yes, my child," she whispered, though she didn't believe her own words. Meanwhile, deep underground, the last remaining scientists worked endlessly in the communication center, trying to keep the signal alive. Their power was fading, their systems breaking apart. "We can't keep it going much longer," one scientist said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Just a little more," Lyra replied softly. "Someone will hear. Someone must." Above them, the sky glowed red with fire. The twin suns that once gave light now shone through thick clouds of smoke. The once sweet air smelled of ash and fear. But even as everything seemed lost, hope still flickered like a tiny flame. In the ruins of the great city, Elder Vaniel looked up at the sky and whispered a prayer. "If there is mercy in the stars," he said, "let it find us." What the Alaran didn't know was that their signal had traveled farther than they could ever imagine. It passed beyond the systems of peaceful worlds, beyond trade routes and colonies, until it reached a region known only in stories, the Deathworlder sector. There, on a blue planet surrounded by satellites and warships, humanity lived. Humans were known by many names in the galaxy. To some, they were explorers and inventors. To others, they were a warning, a reminder of what happens when life grows on a world too violent to forgive. Earth was a dangerous planet. It threw storms, earthquakes, plagues, and predators at its people, and they survived them all. Evolution had made humans tough, smart, and unbreakable. Other species called them Deathworlders because their home was considered uninhabitable by most life forms. Yet they thrived there. When the Alaran signal reached a human outpost orbiting Mars, it was first mistaken for background noise, but when the AI decoded the words, it froze. Distress signal detected, the system reported. Origin unknown. Content, plea for rescue. Within hours, the message reached the human fleet command. Admiral Serena Voss, the youngest admiral in Earth's Defense Alliance, listened to the broken, fading voice of the Alaran. She didn't hesitate. "Prepare a report," she ordered. "We're responding." Her officers exchanged uncertain looks. "Admiral," one said carefully, "we don't know who they are. This could be a trap. We have no obligation to—" Serena cut him off. "They asked for help," she said simply. "That's all that matters." On Earth, news of the transmission spread quickly. Some called it foolish to get involved in another war. Others said it was humanity's duty. For every human who feared the risk, there was another whose heart burned with compassion. Across continents, people watched the Alaran's trembling voice replayed on their screens, and something inside them stirred. It reminded them of their own ancestors, the times when humans cried out for help and someone answered. The Council finally approved the mission. Humanity would send aid, not a small convoy, but a full battle fleet. It was both rescue and defense. Within a week, the massive ships of the Deathworlders rose from the docks of Luna Base. Engines glowed with blue light, illuminating the darkness of space. Soldiers stood ready in their armor, engineers checked every system, and medics prepared supplies for the wounded they would soon meet. As the fleet moved toward the Alaran system, the stars reflected on their hulls like fireflies in the dark. Some soldiers whispered prayers. Others tightened their grips on their weapons. They all knew the risks, but they also knew something greater. The call for help was not just a sound, it was a promise. Humanity had once been saved from extinction countless times by their own courage, and now they would become the saviors. Back on the Alaran world, Lyra sat beside the communication console, her face pale and eyes weary. "The power is almost gone," one scientist said softly. "We've done all we can." Lyra nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. "Then let it be," she whispered. "If no one comes, at least we tried." She looked at the small hologram of her planet's once beautiful skyline. "We were dreamers," she said. "We built a paradise. Maybe someone out there will remember us." But even as her words faded far beyond her dying world, the Deathworlders' fleet had already jumped into hyperspace. The cry for rescue had been heard. Humanity was on its way. The stars ahead seemed to burn brighter that night, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The Alaran had sent a plea into the void, never knowing who would answer. But the ones who heard, the ones shaped by a world of storms and struggle, were coming. And when Deathworlders moved, the galaxy listened. For the first time since the invasion began, there was a whisper of hope on the dying planet. The weak signal still flickered across the empty channels, its message echoing faintly. "Please, help us." And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, a calm human voice replied, "We heard you." Far away in the quiet corner of the galaxy, chaos began to take shape. The planet Sarathis, home to the gentle and peace-loving Sarathi species, had fallen into deep despair. For generations, they lived in harmony with nature and technology, believing that violence was a curse only primitive worlds suffered from. But now their skies burned. Strange warships from an aggressive alien empire known as the Gralix had entered their orbit, and in only a few weeks, cities that once shone with golden light turned into fields of ash and ruin. The Sarathi were terrified, their leaders helpless. Their defense systems were weak, their people untrained for war. Every hour, the Gralix destroyed something precious, leaving behind silence and smoke. The Sarathi government tried everything. They sent peaceful transmissions to the invaders, begging for negotiations. But the Gralix responded with laughter and plasma fire. Desperate, the Sarathi Council decided to send out a universal distress call, a plea for rescue to anyone who could hear. Their technology could project their message far into the stars, but it carried a warning too. They feared their signal might never reach a world that cared enough to help. They prayed that somewhere, someone stronger and kinder would listen. When the distress signal left Sarathis, it crossed countless light years of cold darkness. The message was filled with trembling voices of Sarathi civilians crying for help, showing burning cities, broken towers, and children being carried through the smoke. It was heartbreaking to watch, a sound that could reach even the hardest hearts. The signal was supposed to reach neutral star systems, places where trade and peace still existed. But the universe had other plans. The transmission went farther than expected. It slipped through a wormhole that stretched into the Milky Way, the galaxy where humans lived, the Deathworlders. On Earth, the message was first caught by a deep space observatory in Chile. The scientists there didn't believe it was real at first. The signal was old, fuzzy, and written in a language no one had seen before. But when AI translation systems started decoding it, silence fell in the room. They saw images of burning alien cities and a voice that cried out for help. Humanity had seen many strange things in space, but never something like this. News spread quickly across the planet. An alien civilization was begging for rescue. The United Earth government called an emergency session. Every military leader, scientist, and diplomat was present. They all watched the footage in shock. For some, it was curiosity. For others, sorrow. And for the soldiers, especially those from the Fleet Command, it sparked something deeper. Humanity had been through countless wars in its history. They had learned to fight, adapt, and survive on a planet filled with danger. Earth was a death world, a world that trained its people to endure the impossible. But humans also had compassion. The Sarathi were begging, and humanity could not ignore it. At first, there was disagreement. Some argued that humanity should not interfere. What if this war dragged Earth into a galactic conflict? Others believed that helping the Sarathi would show the universe that humans were not just monsters of survival, but protectors too. As debates grew, one voice stood above the rest. Admiral Serena Holt of the Deathworlder fleet. She had fought in the Solar Wars and lost half her crew in defense of humanity. She watched the transmission in silence, then said firmly, "If we don't answer, then what are we? We are Deathworlders. We fight not because we love war, but because no one else can." Her words echoed across the room. One by one, the generals agreed. Humanity would respond to the Sarathi plea, not with words, but with power, the kind of power that made even the stars tremble. They began mobilizing their fleets. Massive ships, each built from titanium and plasma alloys, roared to life. The mighty war fleet of Earth, as it was known, had not been activated in decades. Soldiers began suiting up. Engineers worked without rest, and communications officers sent out encoded messages across human colonies. The order was clear: prepare for interstellar deployment. Meanwhile, in a small Sarathi bunker beneath their capital city, the people waited. Weeks had passed since they sent their plea. Many had lost hope. Their food was running out, their defenses broken. Every day the sky grew darker with Galactic warships. Children whispered prayers to the stars, hoping that someone, anyone, was listening. Then one night, something extraordinary happened. A faint transmission came back through their comm systems. It wasn't in their language, but the tone was calm, confident, and filled with something powerful: determination. The signal repeated one line: "This is the United Earth Fleet, hold your ground. Help is coming." The bunker erupted in disbelief. Could it be true? The humans, they had heard their call? The Sarathi scientists analyzed the signal's coordinates and found that it was coming from far, far away, too far for any normal species to travel in time. But then again, humans were not normal. Within hours, the Sarathi communication systems detected massive spatial distortions near their star system. Galactic sensors picked it up too and panicked. Something huge was approaching, something powerful enough to bend space around it. Across the galaxy, the Deathworlders' war fleet entered warp. Hundreds of ships, sleek and armored, carrying the insignia of a planet forged by struggle, moved in formation. Inside those ships were humans, men and women who had faced death more times than they could count. They were not gods, but they might as well have been to the Sarathi. Every heartbeat in those ships was synced to one goal: protect the helpless. As they approached Sarathis, their communication screens flickered to life. Admiral Serena stood at the command bridge, her eyes fixed on the burning planet below. "Engage shields," she said. "Target the enemy fleets. Let them know what Deathworlders do when they hear a cry for help." Her voice carried through every ship in the fleet, igniting a wave of adrenaline and unity among her soldiers. Humanity had heard the plea of strangers, and now the galaxy was about to learn what it meant to wake the warriors of Earth. The first phase of the operation had begun. The Sarathi didn't yet understand who the humans truly were. They didn't know that the word Deathworlder wasn't an insult. It was a title earned through blood storms and survival. But they were about to find out. In the darkness of space, the war drums of humanity began to beat, and for the first time in history, the monsters of a deadly world rose not to conquer, but to save. The human war fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm of steel and fire. One moment, Sarathis' skies were filled only with Gralic warships and smoke, and the next, giant shadows appeared above the clouds. The Sarathi people looked up from their bunkers and shattered homes, seeing flashes of light streaking across the heavens. Their sensors couldn't even count the number of ships arriving. The Deathworlders had come. The Gralics, who had been celebrating their victory, suddenly froze. Their scanners screamed with warnings. Hundreds of human ships had entered the system, each one massive and heavily armed. The Gralic commander shouted for an immediate battle formation, but it was already too late. The first wave of human missiles, guided by AI systems far beyond anything the Gralics had seen, cut through space like angry comets. Explosions lit the darkness as Gralic destroyers broke apart, burning into bright fragments before vanishing into the planet's atmosphere. From orbit, Admiral Serena Holt watched in silence. Her hands rested on the command console as tactical screens filled with red and blue indicators, enemy and friendly units. She could see Sarathis below, a wounded world glowing under fire. "Target all enemy ships within range," she ordered calmly. "Use minimal ground fire until we clear the sky. I don't want collateral damage." Her voice was strong but controlled, the voice of someone who had seen too much war but still chose compassion. The Deathworlders moved with precision. Their fleets were divided into wings: Vanguard, Hammer, and Shield. The Vanguard ships launched first, using railguns that could pierce through enemy shields like glass. The Hammer fleet followed, unleashing devastating plasma artillery barrages that destroyed entire squadrons in seconds. The Shield fleet protected the planet below, ready to intercept anything heading toward the Sarathi surface. The Sarathi people watched in disbelief. Through their damaged communication systems, they saw flashes in the sky like falling stars. But these stars were not bringing destruction. They were defending them. For the first time in months, they dared to hope. Children who had stopped speaking smiled again when they heard the distant thunder of human cannons echoing through the night sky. Down on the surface, a group of Sarathi survivors gathered near a ruined observatory. Among them was a young scientist named Laura, who had helped send the original distress signal. She stared up at the heavens with tears in her eyes. "They came," she whispered. "They really came." Beside her, an elder Sarathi nodded slowly. "And they fight like storms," he said. "May the stars guide their strength." The Gralic fleet tried to regroup. They launched counterattacks using energy torpedoes and swarm drones, hoping to overwhelm the humans with sheer numbers. But the Deathworlders were born for chaos. Their ships danced through the battlefield with mechanical precision, dodging plasma fire while countering with lethal accuracy. Human pilots, trained on the dangerous skies of Earth, flew as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions. Inside one of the smaller human assault ships, Captain Ethan Cole led a squadron of fighters. His voice came through the comms, steady and confident. "Lock on the nearest destroyer. Don't give them room to breathe." His ship dove between two Gralic cruisers, weaving through enemy fire before releasing a burst of high-yield plasma rounds. The cruiser erupted into flames, breaking apart in a silent explosion that lit up the void. The Gralic commander, a reptilian being named Varkath, was furious. He slammed his clawed hand against the console. "They are only humans, a Deathworld species. How can they fight like this?" His officers avoided his gaze, too afraid to answer. One of them whispered, "Because, Commander, they are not afraid to die." As the hours passed, the battle raged across the Sarathi sky. Every explosion painted the atmosphere with blue and orange light. The Sarathi world had become the stage for a war between cruelty and courage, and the Deathworlders were winning. But humans knew the cost of victory. Admiral Serena received reports that one of the Vanguard ships, the Horizon's Edge, had been struck. Hundreds of lives lost. She closed her eyes for a moment, whispering a silent prayer for them, then gave a new order. "Activate Operation Dawnfall. End this." Operation Dawnfall was humanity's way of saying they had no more patience for evil. The Hammer fleet charged forward, forming a massive triangle formation. Thousands of railguns and plasma cannons charged in unison. When Serena gave the signal, they fired together. The blast wave tore through the Grallic main fleet, breaking their ships apart like paper in a hurricane. Even the Grallic flagship, the scourge of 9 suns, couldn't survive the barrage. It exploded into a brilliant burst of fire, scattering debris across space. For the first time, the Sarathi capital saw daylight again. The clouds of war parted slightly, revealing stars shining through. People came out of their shelters cautiously. They looked up and saw trails of human ships moving gracefully through the sky. It looked almost beautiful, like angels made of metal protecting them. Laura and her team tried to contact the human fleet. Their signal was weak, but it reached Admiral Serena's ship. A translator AI converted their trembling voices into human language. "To the humans who came to our aid," Laura said, "you have given us hope. We thought the stars had forgotten us, but now we see that there is light even in the darkest space." Serena smiled faintly. She looked at her communications officer and said softly, "Tell them this. You called for help and we answered. You are not alone anymore." The message was transmitted to the Sarathi surface and it spread quickly through underground channels. The people began cheering. Their tears were no longer from fear but from relief. For the first time, the Sarathi realized that even in a universe full of cruelty, there were still warriors who fought for what was right. Yet the battle wasn't completely over. A few Grallic ships tried to retreat, heading toward the outer edge of the system. Admiral Serena didn't let them escape. "Pursue them," she commanded. "They will not come back to harm the innocent." The Deathworlder fleet chased the survivors down, ensuring they could never rebuild their terror again. When silence finally returned to Sarathis, it felt unreal. The smoke still hung over the cities, but the constant sound of explosions was gone. People stepped outside for the first time in months, breathing the air that no longer smelled of fire. The Sarathi Council sent a message of deep gratitude to Earth, inviting the humans to land and meet them. Human ships descended slowly, breaking through the clouds like silver birds. The sight was breathtaking. The Sarathi gathered in huge crowds to welcome their saviors. They had expected monsters, creatures hardened by a deadly world, but when the human soldiers stepped onto the soil, the Sarathi were surprised. The humans were not cruel or emotionless. They looked tired, kind, and full of empathy. They had fought like beasts but carried hearts full of mercy. Captain Ethan Cole was among those who landed. Laura ran up to him, unable to hide her emotions. "You saved us," she said, her voice shaking. "Why, we are strangers. You had nothing to gain." Ethan smiled slightly, looking at the ruined skyline. "Because once we were like you," he said quietly. "Alone, afraid, and surrounded by enemies. Someone has to break the cycle." That night, Sarathis glowed not from fire but from lights of rebuilding. Human engineers helped restore power grids while medics treated both Sarathi and wounded human soldiers together. The two species worked side by side. Laura watched as human children aboard the supply ships waved down to Sarathi children, and laughter filled the air again. Up in orbit, Admiral Serena stood by the window of her flagship. She could see the planet shining below and a soft smile formed on her face. "Mission complete," she whispered. But deep down she knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy had now seen what happens when Deathworlders rise, not for conquest but for justice. And somewhere, far away in the cold shadows of space, other species watched this event unfold. They whispered to each other in fear and awe. The Deathworlders answered a cry for help, one alien leader murmured. "May the stars help anyone who dares harm the innocent again." For the Sarathi, the night of horror was over. For humanity, it was another chapter in their legend, a story that would echo across galaxies. The day the Deathworlders came not as destroyers but as saviors. Days passed after the great battle, but the memory of it still burned brightly in the hearts of both the Sarathi and the humans. Sarathis was silent now. No more screams, no more explosions, no more glowing enemy ships in the sky. The once broken cities now echoed with the sounds of rebuilding. But beneath the peace, something deeper was changing. The bond between two completely different worlds was beginning to grow stronger. The humans had stayed on Sarathis to help. They didn't just save the Sarathi and leave. They worked alongside them, repairing homes, clearing debris, and bringing supplies from orbit. The Sarathi, a peaceful and delicate species, were amazed to see how hardworking and determined the humans were. They saw soldiers who had fought in terrifying battles. now carrying food to starving families, repairing power lines, and teaching the Sarathi how to defend themselves. Admiral Serena Holt made it her mission to ensure that the Sarathi could stand on their own again. She often visited the surface herself, dressed not in her admiral's uniform but in simple field armor. The Sarathi respected her deeply, calling her the Iron Guardian. She never demanded respect, it came naturally. Her words were always steady and calm, giving hope wherever she went. "War leaves scars," she told the Sarathi Council, "but scars can remind us that we survived." In one of the ruined cities, Captain Ethan Cole and his squad were working to restore communication systems. Laura, the young Sarathi scientist who had sent the distress signal, assisted them. She had grown close to Ethan's team over the days, especially to Ethan himself. She admired how humans handled pressure, with humor, strength, and strange courage. They laughed even when exhausted and kept working even when hurt. To her, they were living proof that survival could be beautiful. One evening, while Ethan and Laura stood on a hill overlooking the half-rebuilt city, the orange light of Cerathus's twin suns bathed everything in gold. Laura looked at the horizon quietly and said, "I never thought I'd see our world alive again." Ethan smiled faintly. "You called for help," he said softly, "and sometimes the universe answers." She turned to him with curious eyes. "Do you always answer every call for help?" He looked down for a moment before replying, "Not always. But this one, it reached our hearts." As days turned into weeks, stories of what happened on Cerathus began spreading across the galaxy. Other alien races heard whispers about how humans had come to the rescue of a dying world. The word Deathworlders, once spoken with fear, started to carry new meaning. Powerful, yes, but also protectors. Yet not everyone was happy about this change. The surviving members of the Grellic Empire were furious. Their pride was crushed, their fleets destroyed, and their leaders humiliated. They swore revenge. Far away in the dark edges of the galaxy, Commander Varkath, who had escaped the destruction, assembled a secret council of surviving Grellic officers. In a cold chamber lit by red lights, he slammed his fist against the table. "Those humans have shamed us before the stars," he roared. "They dared to interfere in Grellic affairs. We will return, and when we do, Cerathus will burn and Earth with it." His soldiers growled in agreement, but fear glimmered behind their anger. They had seen what the Deathworlders were capable of, and that memory haunted them. Meanwhile, on Cerathus, humans continued to help the Sarathi rebuild their defense systems. Admiral Serena and her engineers taught them how to create protective shields, early warning sensors, and basic starship weaponry. "You don't have to become warriors," Serena told them. "But you must never be helpless again." The Sarathi nodded, grateful but nervous. They were not built for war. Their hands were made for creation, not destruction. But under the guidance of the humans, they slowly learned to protect themselves without losing their gentleness. During one of their engineering sessions, Laura watched as human soldiers tested a new orbital defense cannon. The weapon's precision amazed her. It could target an incoming ship from orbit with perfect accuracy. "You people live on a dangerous world," she said, half in awe, half in disbelief. Ethan chuckled. "You have no idea. On Earth, even the trees can try to kill you. That's why we learn to adapt. If nature didn't destroy us, nothing else could." Laura laughed softly. "Then maybe that's why you were the only ones who could save us." But peace was short-lived. A few weeks later, strange readings appeared on the long-range scanners. Multiple unidentified signals approaching the system from deep space. The readings were erratic but powerful. The humans knew what it meant immediately. The Grellics were coming back. Admiral Serena was on the command deck when the report arrived. She didn't flinch. "So they learned nothing," she muttered. "Very well. Then we'll teach them again." The Sarathi panicked when the news spread. They had only just begun to rebuild. They couldn't survive another invasion. But Serena remained calm. "This time you are not alone," she said over the broadcast. Her voice carried strength and certainty. "You fought with courage before, and you will again. The Deathworlders stand with you." Human fleets quickly returned to full readiness. Ships that had been docked for repair powered up once more, their engines glowing blue against the dark sky. Sarathi volunteers joined the humans, assisting however they could, monitoring communications, providing planetary data, and even offering their own small crafts for reconnaissance. When the Grellic fleet finally arrived at the edge of the Sarathus system, they were larger than before, armed with new weapons and vengeance. But this time the humans were ready, and so were the Sarathi. The human flagship, Vanguard Prime, stood at the front of the formation. Admiral Serena's voice echoed across the fleet. "We don't fight for conquest. We fight for the ones who believe in peace. Let's end this, for good." The battle that followed was like thunder and lightning across the stars. The Gralix came in with fury, but the humans met them with strategy and discipline. Sarathi defense platforms, guided by human AI, fired energy beams from the planet's orbit, surprising the Gralic attackers. For the first time, the Sarathi were defending themselves, and doing it well. Captain Ethan's fighter squadron was in the middle of the chaos, weaving through enemy lines, destroying enemy bombers that tried to reach the surface. "Stay close, watch your flanks," he shouted over the radio. He saw one of his wingmen hit and explode, but he didn't stop. The Deathworlders didn't run. They adapted, pushed, and endured. Down on Sarathis, Laura worked in the control room, relaying data to the human fleet. Her hands trembled as she saw flashes of light from the battle above. "Please let them win again," she whispered. Around her, Sarathi engineers worked side by side with human technicians, their fear replaced by determination. Hours passed and the fight grew fiercer. The Gralics were relentless, but humans were unstoppable. The tide began to turn when Admiral Serena ordered the deployment of the Black Lance Squad, a special unit of stealth ships equipped with experimental weapons. They slipped behind enemy lines unnoticed and targeted the Gralic command ship. One precise shot from the Black Lance tore through its core, igniting a chain reaction. The explosion was so massive that even those on the planet could see it. When the light faded, the Gralic fleet was broken. Some tried to flee, but the humans didn't chase this time. Instead, Admiral Serena sent one final message through the galactic channels. "This war is over. Leave the innocent in peace or face the Deathworlders again." Her words were like thunder rolling through the stars. When silence returned, cheers erupted across the planet. The Sarathi hugged each other and cried tears of relief. In the skies, the human ships floated like guardians watching over a world reborn. Ethan landed his ship and rushed to the control room where Laura was waiting. She ran to him without thinking and hugged him tightly. "You came back," she said softly. "I told you," Ethan replied, smiling. "Deathworlders don't abandon friends." Later that night, the sky of Sarathis glowed with thousands of lights. It wasn't fire this time, it was celebration. Humans and Sarathi gathered together, sharing food, laughter, and stories. The once broken city was filled with music. Admiral Serena stood quietly at the edge of the gathering, watching her people and the Sarathi side by side. She felt a deep peace in her heart. For all the pain, the loss, and the blood, they had created something worth fighting for. Unity. The Sarathi Council declared that the day would forever be known as the Day of the Guardians. Statues were planned, not to glorify war but to honor courage and kindness, and when the stars shone that night, they seemed to shine a little brighter, as if even the universe was proud. But far beyond those stars, unknown eyes still watched, the kind of eyes that never rest, always calculating, always waiting. The galaxy had learned that humanity was a force of nature, but no one yet knew what else they were capable of. The Deathworlders had answered a plea for help, and in doing so, they had changed the balance of power forever. When the humans finally arrived at the edge of the alien world, the entire planet held its breath. The sky filled with hundreds of dark, massive warships, each one larger than any alien vessel ever seen before. The Deathworlders, as the galaxy called them, had come. But their arrival was not like the others had expected. There was no sound, no chaos at first, only silence. The humans' fleet moved with precision, as if every single movement was carefully planned. The alien species who had sent the call for help months ago, the fragile Lurians, watched from their capital city, trembling. They had called for rescue, not realizing who they were calling. They thought they would be saved by peacekeepers or diplomatic forces. Instead, they had summoned the most feared warriors in the galaxy. Admiral Hayes, commander of the human fleet, stood in the central command room of the flagship Vanguard. His face was calm, his tone controlled, but his eyes carried the weight of every war humanity had ever fought. Reports came in one after another. Enemy locations, energy readings, planetary defenses. The Lurians' enemies, the Zelthar Dominion, had already begun their invasion, destroying entire cities and enslaving survivors. The Dominion was confident no one could stop them. They had fought countless species and always won. But this time they had made a mistake. They had attacked a world that had unknowingly called humanity. And humanity did not ignore distress calls. When the first human troops landed, the Lurians watched in awe. They had expected delicate soldiers, maybe diplomats with flags and translators. Instead, black-armored warriors stepped out of ships, their weapons gleaming under alien sunlight. They moved like shadows, silent and deadly. The ground shook when tanks rolled across the fields. Drones hovered above, scanning every corner of the sky. To the Lurians, it looked like the end of the world. But for humans, it was just another rescue mission. The battle began before dawn. The Zelthar Dominion forces surrounded the main Lurian city, ready to destroy it. But before their ships could fire, the human fleet unleashed their power. Blue light filled the skies as plasma cannons roared, cutting through enemy lines like fire through dry grass. The air was filled with smoke and the screams of machines. The Zelthar ships tried to fight back, but they had never faced such fury. Humans didn't just fight to win, they fought to end threats completely. On the ground, human soldiers pushed forward with unmatched determination. They were called Deathworlders for a reason. Their home planet was dangerous, filled with storms, predators, and natural disasters. Survival had shaped them into something no other species could match. The Lurians watched from behind protective barriers, their eyes wide as humans ran into fire, dragged wounded comrades to safety, and stood firm against explosions that would have destroyed others. To the Lurians, these humans looked less like soldiers and more like legends. In the middle of the chaos, a young Lurian named Sari found herself face to face with a human soldier. She had been hiding in the ruins of her home, terrified. The soldier's armor was scarred, his helmet cracked, but when he saw her, he stopped and extended a hand. "You're safe now," he said softly through his translator. She didn't understand all the words, but his tone was enough. For the first time since the war began, she felt hope. He lifted her up, carried her to safety, and then turned back to fight. That image of courage spread among the Lurians like wildfire. By the second day, the Zelthar forces began to retreat. Their ships were burning, their leaders in panic. The humans had not only crushed their armies, they had dismantled their pride. Admiral Hayes sent a message to the Zelthar commander. "You brought war to a world that asked for help. We are that help. Remember that." The message echoed across the galaxy, and every species who heard it knew. The Deathworlders had returned to the stars, and their enemies would never sleep peacefully again. When the last of the Zelthar ships exploded in the sky, the humans didn't cheer. They simply began rebuilding. Engineers, medics, and volunteers poured out of ships, setting up shelters and hospitals. The Lurians couldn't believe what they saw. The same people who had fought with terrifying strength were now healing their wounds, repairing their cities, planting crops. Humanity's dual nature, warriors and protectors, was something no alien could understand. They could destroy empires yet kneel down to comfort a crying child. Sari, now safe in a rebuilt village, watched as humans worked beside her people. She remembered the soldier who saved her, though she never learned his name. She helped carry supplies, translating between humans and Lurians. Every time she heard their laughter or saw them share food, she realized something powerful. The Deathworlders didn't fight for conquest or revenge. They fought for life, for the weak, for those who could not protect themselves. Weeks later, Admiral Hayes stood on the command deck once again, watching the planet from orbit. The mission was almost complete. The Lurians were safe. Reports showed stability returning, but he knew this wasn't the end. Word would spread fast. Other worlds in danger would call for help. And when they did, humanity would answer again, not because they were conquerors, but because that's who they were now. The galaxy had once feared humans, but now they were beginning to understand them. On Earth, news of the mission spread through every city. People watched the footage. Lurian children waving human flags, destroyed cities being rebuilt, alien leaders bowing in gratitude. For the first time in centuries, humanity saw themselves not as destroyers, but as guardians of peace. Veterans spoke with pride. Scientists studied the alien technology they had encountered. Diplomats prepared for new alliances, and somewhere deep inside, every human felt a spark of purpose. They were making history among the stars. For the Lurians, the humans became a legend. They built monuments for the fallen Deathworlders, carved their names in stone, Their song spoke of the dark ships that came from the sky, of warriors who walked through fire and left light behind. Children grew up hearing stories of the human fleet that came when no one else did. In the final ceremony, the Lurian Council thanked Admiral Hayes. One of them said, "When we called for help, we expected saviors. Instead, we found family." Hayes simply nodded, knowing words were not enough to describe the bond that had formed between their worlds. As the human fleet left the orbit, the stars shimmered brighter, reflecting off their ships. The galaxy watched in silence. Somewhere on another distant planet, another cry for help would soon rise. And humanity, the Deathworlders, would be there once again, ready to fight, ready to protect, ready to show that even in the darkest corners of space, there was still light.